Hello everyone. In the previous video we discussed about the basics of chromatography, and in this video we would be looking at the different types of chromatography. Chromatography is of different types based upon three different categories. The first one is the shape of the chromatography, and the second one is the physical state of the stationary phase and mobile phase, and the third category is the mechanism of separation. In this video, we would look at the different types of chromatography based on the first two categories, that is the shape of the chromatographic bed and the physical state of stationary and mobile phase. Based upon the chromatographic bed, chromatography can be of two types, that is planar and columnar. Now, what is chromatographic bed? So, this is nothing but this is the stationary phase onto which the sample is loaded and onto which the sample is separated. Now, this chromatographic bed can be a flat surface or it can be in the form of a tube. If the chromatographic bed or the stationary phase is a flat surface, we call it as planar chromatography. Now, here the flat surface or the stationary phase, it is exposed to the atmosphere directly, so it is also known as open bed chromatography. Planar chromatography is of two types again, that is paper chromatography and thin layer chromatography. In paper chromatography, the stationary phase is a paper, whereas in thin layer chromatography, the stationary phase is a thin layer of silica gel or an alumina that is spread onto a glass plate, plastic plate or a metal plate. Now here this is an image of a paper chromatography and this is an image of a thin layer chromatography using a TLC plate. Now this is a process by which TLC plate is prepared. Here the silica gel or alumina is mixed along with the solvent of water and then it is spread onto a glass slide. Now once this solidifies, we can peel the TLC plate out and then use it as a chromatographic bed. Now how thin layer chromatography or paper chromatography is carried out? Now this is a process of the chromatography. Here there are three major steps. So the first one is to spot the TLC plate. So here we see an image of a TLC plate. First, a line at the bottom of the TNC plate and at the top of the TNC plate is marked. This indicates the initial step and the final step. In the initial line, different samples can be loaded using a capillary tube. So this is a capillary tube with the sample, and this sample can be loaded using a capillary tube. Then once the sample is loaded or spotted, we can develop the chromatogram by taking this particular TLC plate and immersing it into a chamber containing solvent. Now this solvent will diffuse through the plate, it will move through the TLC plate, and as it moves, it will separate the sample into its constituents, and as a result, we can visualize the different constituents in the form of the bands. Now this bands is only visualized mainly visualized in ultraviolet light or UV light. So these are the different bands indicating different compounds of a particular sample. Now this is how, using a plain surface like paper or TLC plate, we can separate different components of a sample. The next type of chromatography based on the chromatographic bed is the column chromatography, and as the name indicates, column means a thin cylindrical tube, and stationary phase in this particular chromatography is filled within this particular cylindrical tube. Now the stationary phase can fill the entire region of the column or the tube. In that case, we call it as a packed column chromatography. In some case, the stationary phase is only filled in the stationary phase only fills the border of the tube and not filled inside the tube. So there is an inside hollow region which is generally used for the movement of the mobile phase. This type of chromatography we also call it as open tubular chromatography. In case of column chromatography, the first step is to prepare the column. Any column loading matrix or stationary phase, for example silica gel, is mixed along with the solvent and then it is loaded onto the glass column. This glass column has an opening here and then there is an opening at the bottom as well. The bottom opening as a stopper. So this stopper, once the stopper is removed, the constituents of the column can come out of the column. So that is how it works. Once the matrix or the stationary phase is loaded onto the column must be packed with the solvent. So the solvent is pre-eluted, the solvent is added and then it is removed, so that the entire column is already saturated with the solvent. And the third step is to load the sample. For sample loading, there are two types. One is wet packing and dry packing. Wet packing simply means that, let's say we have the sample along with the solvent, it is directly injected onto the stationary phase, that is wet packing. In dry packing, the sample along with the solvent is mixed with silica or any other drying agent, so that the sample is in the form of a powder. Now this powder is then loaded onto the stationary phase. Now this we call it as dry packing. Once the packing is done, the chromatography process takes place. Here the sample onto the sample solvent is added, and as the solvent flows through the sample gets separated into the different compounds. Now all these compounds will be eluted through the bottom opening, and as the samples are eluted, the components are eluted, we can collect different fractions based upon the duration. So the first 5 minutes, the volume that I collect, I can term it as fraction 1, and the next 5 minutes would be fraction 2, and so on. So the compounds present in fraction 1 will be different from the compound present in fraction 40. So that is how different compounds present in a single sample can be separated using column chromatography. Next is based on the physical state of the stationary and mobile phase. The chromatography is of two types. The first one is liquid chromatography, where the mobile phase is liquid. Now liquid chromatography also has two different types, that is liquid chromatography, where the stationary phase is liquid, and liquid solid chromatography, where the stationary phase is solid. The other category is the gas chromatography, where the mobile phase is gaseous in nature. This gas chromatography is differentiated into two types: gas liquid chromatography, where the stationary phase is liquid, and gas solid chromatography, where the stationary phase is solid. Now, these are the two different categories of types of chromatographies that we saw in this video. In the next video, we would look at the type of chromatography based upon the mechanism of separation.